The first time Princess Seraphine Noctara felt boredom, she almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Boredom was a human complaint, an insect's thought, something small and temporary, like daylight. But boredom could grow teeth. It could rot duty from the inside. It could make even immortals careless. And carelessness, in the world of the Crimson Veil, got princes decapitated and queens burned alive in their own thrones. Seraphine sat high above the fighting pit of Vespera Citadel, where the stone towers were cut from black volcanic glass and polished so smooth they reflected torchlight like liquid blood. The citadel rose from the heart of Europe territory, the oldest battleground on Earth, the continent where vampire dynasties had learned diplomacy only because constant war had become expensive. Below her, the arena of 7 knights roared. Not with cheering. Vampires didn't cheer the way humans did. It roared with hunger. Every movement below stirred the crowd like wind through a graveyard. Every blow struck flesh with a sound too intimate for daylight ears. The gathered spectators, lords, barons, priest-killers, and throne-blooded heirs from every continent, watched through eyes that didn't blink often. They had come to see combat. But more than that, they had come to measure weakness. Because this tournament was not sport, it was governance. Once every 7 years, the vampire clans met under ancient treaty to settle border disputes, power rankings, and blood debts without igniting a total continental war. The treaty was called the Crimson Veil. It was written in the 1st century on parchment made of human skin and inked in elder blood. The Veil's central rule was simple. Clans may fight in the arena, so the world does not burn outside it. And tonight, the world hung on the edge of a blade. A champion from Africa territory, a warrior of Clan Sunspite, tall and severe, his skin marked with ritual scars that shimmered like black silver, dropped his opponent with a strike so clean it looked almost merciful. The fallen vampire hit the sand and did not rise. The crowd murmured approval. Not applause, approval. Seraphine watched with a face trained into neutrality since she was a child and had first learned that crowns weren't jewelry. They were chains. Her fingers curled around the stone railing, hard enough to leave faint cracks in the ancient rock. Beside her stood her advisor, Lord Cairn Velas, a man whose smile belonged to courtrooms and assassinations equally. If Seraphine was ice and velvet, Cairn was wine and poison. "My princess," Cairn murmured, his voice soft enough not to carry. The next delegation approaches. Seraphine didn't respond at first. Her eyes remained on the sand below, not on the victor, on the empty space where another champion should have been standing. Because 5 years ago, this arena had belonged to someone else. His name had been Lucien Virel, and he had died for her. Lucien had fought in this very pit, not as a tournament contestant, but as the final defense when a rival clan tried to break the Veil's rules. When assassins breached the citadel and rushed the royal platforms to slit Seraphine's throat before she could inherit Europe territory's crown. Lucien had stepped between her and death. Lucien had killed 12 attackers in the time it took her to blink. Lucien had taken a blade meant for her heart. And while he bled out in her arms, while the arena sand drank him like thirsty soil, he had smiled at her as if dying were a minor inconvenience. "Don't you dare waste this life," he had whispered. Then the light had left his eyes, and something inside Seraphine had gone silent with him. For 5 years she had worn her grief like armor. Now she wore her crown. And both were heavy. Cairn cleared his throat delicately, as if he was afraid to disturb her haunted stillness. Seraphine's gaze finally lifted toward the massive iron gates at the far end of the arena. They opened with a groan that felt like the earth exhaling. A delegation entered, not from Africa, not from Asia, not from the Americas, from Antarctica territory. A ripple moved through the arena like a collective shiver. Antarctica was not like the other territories. No humans lived there. No governments claimed it. No religions built temples there. But vampires? Vampires had built a kingdom beneath the ice centuries ago, where sunlight was weak, winters were eternal, and secrecy was as natural as breath. Antarctica was the silent continent, and its clan, the White Abyss Court, rarely showed itself. So when their delegation stepped onto the arena sand, every vampire watching leaned forward by instinct. 3 figures walked in front. Two were familiar to Seraphine, pale nobles with hair like snow and eyes like the bottom of a frozen sea. But the third made Seraphine's breath catch in a throat that had not needed air in centuries. He wore simple armor, dark leather reinforced with plates that bore no crest, no jeweled insignias, no ceremonial cape, nothing that screamed royalty or ancient blood. But his posture was wrong for a common fighter. It was controlled, quiet, predatory without arrogance. And when he lifted his head, Seraphine's world tilted, because the face looking up into the royal platform was a face she had buried. Not identical, but close enough to make the dead stir in her mind. The same strong jaw, the same eyes that didn't stare, they calculated. The same stillness that said, "I am not afraid of you." Seraphine's skin, pale as moonlit marble, betrayed her. A faint flush rose along her cheekbones. A court-trained vampire could hide fear, rage, hunger. But grief was a beast that didn't respect etiquette. "That's," Karen whispered, and for once his voice lost its polish. "That's impossible." Seraphine didn't answer. She couldn't. The tournament master, a neutral elder chosen by treaty, his voice magically amplified through the arena, announced the challenger in a tone that carried like thunder. "Champion of the White Abyss Court, representing Antarctica territory, Captain Alaric Chen." Captain, not lord, not baron, not blood heir. Captain, a military title, a word that didn't belong in vampire politics. The arena reacted instantly. Some laughed, some hissed, some sat up straighter, offended by the implication that a continent's champion could be something as practical as a captain. But Seraphine didn't hear them. All she heard was the echo of another name. Lucian, 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 because Alaric's gaze had found her. And he did not look away. Not once, as if he had known she would be there. As if this moment had been arranged. The tournament master raised his hand. "Begin." Alaric faced his opponent, a champion from Asia territory, Clan Jade Serpent, an ancient warline known for speed and poison claws. The Jade Serpent warrior moved like a flicker of green lightning, blades extending from his forearms with a metallic snap. He attacked with the precision of 1,000 rehearsed kills. Alaric moved wrong. Not wrong like sloppy, wrong like unpredictable. He didn't meet force with force. He slipped. He turned. He vanished half a step sideways, making the Jade Serpent's blade cut only air. Then, Alaric stepped inside the guard and struck, not with flourish, but with cold efficiency, targeting joints and tendon lines. Vampires didn't like admitting we're vulnerable. The Jade Serpent fighter hissed, surprised. He adjusted, attacked faster. Alaric retreated when doctrine demanded advance. He advanced when the crowd expected retreat. He fought like water, not like a blade. The Jade Serpent's style depended on prediction, on rhythm, on intimidation. But Alaric had no rhythm. He had improvisation. He had battlefield thinking. He rolled beneath a strike that should have cleaved his neck, came up behind the Jade Serpent warrior, hooked an arm around his elbow, twisted, and the crowd heard the crack. Not bone. Vampire bone healed fast. But pride? Pride broke clean and stayed broken. Alaric's next movement was decisive. He drove the Jade Serpent champion to the sand and pinned him with a blade that looked almost primitive compared to the ornate weapons of elder clans. He didn't press it to the heart. He pressed it to the throat. A warning. A choice. "Yield," Alaric said. His voice carried in the sudden silence like a knife dragged across stone. The Jade Serpent champion froze. Then, reluctantly, he spat blood-dark saliva and tapped the sand twice. "Yield." The tournament master declared victory. The arena erupted, not in joy, in confusion, in outrage, in fascination. Because a continent like Antarctica wasn't supposed to produce a fighter like this, and because Alaric had not fought like an elder vampire at all. He had fought like something else, something that learned violence in trenches, not courts, something trained for survival rather than performance. Seraphine's fingers tightened against the stone railing until it cracked deeper. Her eyes never left him. Chiron leaned closer. "My princess," he murmured, "your composure." "I don't care," Seraphine said quietly. That single sentence sent a chill through Cairn, because Seraphine always cared. She always measured every gesture, every breath, every glance. She was Europe territory's crown princess. She was the living symbol of diplomacy. But now, Now her gaze burned like a secret. Alaric accepted the victory mark without pride, without celebration. He simply turned his head once, just once, and looked up at the royal platform. At Seraphine, as if confirming something. And for a moment, just a flicker, Seraphine felt the strangest sensation. Not hunger. Not fear. Recognition. Not of his face. Of something behind his eyes. Something that had died 5 years ago, and somehow stood before her again. Seraphine reached out with her mind just slightly, a whisper touch, the way vampire royals tested intentions. What she encountered stopped her. Alaric's mind wasn't open like most vampires. It wasn't sleek and predatory. It was layered, fortified, structured like a bunker. Thoughts moved fast, evaluating threats and exits and angles as if he was perpetually in war. And deeper than trained paranoia, she sensed something ancient. Not vampire ancient, older. Like a memory that didn't belong to one life, an inheritance, a resonance, as if he carried fragments of someone else inside him. Her contact broke. Seraphine pulled back hard, unsettled. Karen noticed instantly. "What did you sense?" Seraphine's voice was barely audible. "I must speak with him." Karen hesitated. "Princess, Antarctica territory is not like the others. Their court does not bow to Europe. If you demand—" "I am not demanding," Seraphine said, her eyes locked on Alaric as he walked toward the gate. "I am claiming what is mine." Karen went still. That was not a political statement. That was a vampire statement, an old one, the kind that started wars. But Seraphine didn't care, because for the first time in 5 years, her grief was no longer hollow, it was awake, and it was hungry. The halls of Vespera Citadel were older than most nations. They had been carved when Rome still thought it was eternal, when kings believed crowns were divine, when the first vampire treaty was signed in the blood of a pope who never reached morning. Torchlight ran along the walls like liquid gold, but the stone drank most of it. Shadows clung to corners as if they had paid rent. The air smelled faintly of incense and iron. Princess Seraphine Noctara walked as if the castle belonged to her. Because it did. And yet, tonight, she felt like a guest in her own empire. Lord Cairn Velas stayed half a step behind her, as etiquette demanded. The guards flanked them in silent formation. Noctaran sentinels, sworn to Europe territory's crown, armored in black steel etched with scripture-repelling sigils. They passed tapestries depicting old victories. Europe clan wars against the Americas, Europe against Africa, Europe against Asia. Every victory marked by the same lesson. Vampires never stopped fighting. They only changed the shape of war. Seraphine's mind kept returning to the arena, to the way Alaric Chen moved, to the way his eyes met hers without apology, to the sensation of touching his thoughts, fortified, layered, military, like pressing a palm against a sealed vault door and feeling something living behind it. They reached the doors of the meeting chamber. 2 slabs of obsidian black glass taller than giants, framed by silver veins like frozen lightning. Symbols ran along the edges, carved so finely they looked like hairline cracks. Cairn leaned in, voice low. "My princess, this room is protected by the veil itself. No one may spill blood here without violating the treaty." Seraphine didn't slow. "Then it's the safest place to tell the truth." Cairn swallowed a response. He pushed open the doors. They didn't creak, they sighed. Like something reluctant to wake. The chamber of black glass was built for secrets. Its walls were polished obsidian, reflecting the room infinitely, an endless maze of mirrored darkness. In the center stood a long table carved from petrified wood that had once been part of a sacred forest. Candles floated above it, their flames suspended by unseen force, the light refusing to touch the corners fully. And at the far end, waiting like a knife laid neatly on velvet, stood Captain Alaric Chen. He wore no cape, no gemstones, no family crest. Just that practical armor, dark leather, reinforced plates, boots made for running rather than posing. 2 Antarctica nobles stood behind him, pale as snowfall and twice as cold. Their faces were politely blank. But Alaric watched Seraphine as if he had already decided what she was, and whether she was dangerous. Seraphine stepped forward alone. Cairn remained near the doorway with the guards, a silent wall of steel. "Captain Chen," Seraphine said in a voice designed for courts and execution orders alike, "you fought well." Alaric gave a slight nod but did not bow. A murmur moved through the Noctaran guards. Disrespect. Seraphine lifted one finger, and the murmurs died instantly. I don't fight for praise, Alaric said. His accent was strange, not European, not American, not anything Seraphine could place neatly on the map. It sounded trained, like a voice taught to speak only what was necessary. Then why do you fight? She asked. Alaric's eyes narrowed a fraction. Because I was told to. A dangerous answer. Vampires respected motives, not orders. The Antarctica noble on the left, Lord Eidolon Frostvale, spoke smoothly. Our champion is new to intercontinental diplomacy, Your Highness. Antarctica territory appreciates Europe's hospitality. Seraphine didn't look at Eidolon. Her gaze stayed on Alaric. You're new, she said, but you're not young. Alaric didn't react. That was reaction enough. Seraphine stepped closer, slow enough to be graceful, direct enough to be threatening. I knew someone who moved the way you move, she said. A man who died 5 years ago protecting me. A flicker passed over Alaric's face. Not guilt, not confusion. Recognition. Karen stiffened behind her. Seraphine continued, voice quiet now, intimate. His name was Lucien Virul. The chamber felt colder. The floating candle flames leaned as if the air had shifted. Alaric's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice came out softer and far more dangerous. I don't know that name. Seraphine studied him like a surgeon studies a wound. That's not what your face says. Alaric's gaze sharpened. I'm not here to talk about faces, he said. What are you here for then? Seraphine asked. The Antarctica noble on the right, Lady Sable Cryomark, finally spoke, voice like ice over deep water. We are here because the treaty is failing. That sentence landed like a blade. Cairn took a single step forward. Seraphine lifted her hand again, stopping him. The treaty has held for centuries, Seraphine said calmly. Sable's smile was thin. The treaty has held because the clans feared breaking it. She tilted her head toward Alaric. Fear is changing. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Explain. Sable's gaze slid to the mirrored walls as if she didn't want the room itself to hear. There is a faction operating outside the veil, she said. A faction that doesn't belong to any continent. Karen's voice sharpened, the first edge of alarm. Impossible. Every vampire answers to a territory. Sable looked at him like he was a child. Not the ones who were never granted territory. Seraphine felt something in her chest tighten. Name them. Sable's lips barely moved. The Ashen Church. Even Cairn went still, because every vampire, even royal ones, had heard bedtime stories of the Ashen Church. Not as a religion, as a myth. A warning mothers used to frighten fledglings into obedience. Vampires who worshipped extinction. Vampires who believed the clans were a disease. Vampires who hunted other vampires not for politics but for cleansing. Seraphine had always assumed they were folklore. Until now. Alaric spoke suddenly, cutting through the tension. They killed my maker. The chamber froze again. Seraphine's attention snapped to him. Your maker? She echoed. Alaric's eyes burned with a quiet rage that didn't spill over, just smoldered, controlled. Antarctica didn't make me, he said. Not really. Eidolon's expression flickered for a fraction of a second. Annoyance, restraint, warning. Alaric ignored him. I was turned in the ice colonies, Alaric continued. A place that doesn't exist on maps. A place where the veil doesn't reach. Seraphine's voice lowered. And your maker is dead. Alaric nodded once. They came for him, not with hunters. Not with fire, with something worse. He hesitated, as if tasting the memory. Faith. Seraphine felt a chill. Vampires did not fear crosses. Not truly. Not like the stories. But they did fear what faith could create when it was sharpened into obsession. Sable leaned forward slightly. The Ashen Church doesn't use human religion, she said. They use vampire scripture, the oldest blood laws. They call the veil a betrayal. Karen's voice was tight. So you bring your champion to our arena as, what? A warning? Sable's eyes stayed on Seraphine. As an offering, she said. Seraphine's expression didn't change, but the room subtly shifted. A predator recognizing another predator. Explain your meaning carefully, Seraphine said. Eidolon interjected quickly, smooth. Not an offering in surrender, Your Highness. An offering of alliance. Antarctica believes Europe must lead the counter-response. Seraphine's gaze remained on Alaric. And him? Alaric's voice was flat. They want me to become a symbol. Seraphine raised an eyebrow. A symbol of what? Alaric's eyes lifted to hers. Of something the clans forgot. He took a step closer, just one, closing distance without asking permission. I fight like I do, he said quietly, because I wasn't raised in courts. His gaze sharpened. I was raised in war. The 7 territories of blood. Seraphine leaned back slightly, letting silence pressure the room. Then tell me, she said. What do you know of war between clans? Alaric's mouth tightened. I know the map, he said. I know the territories. I know who pretends peace and who stockpiles knives. He looked around the chamber, the black glass multiplying him into 1,000 reflections. Europe territory, the Noctara dynasty. You rule through treaties, wealth, and assassinations disguised as accidents. Cairn's lips pressed together. Alaric continued without flinching. Africa territory, clan Sunspite, who still believe blood must be earned by trial. They don't negotiate, they endure. Australia territory, the Duskborn Reef, hidden along coasts and caves, feeding through smuggling routes, corrupting ports, never taking thrones because they prefer invisible power. Asia territory, the Jade Serpent Courts, poison, discipline, tradition, and memory. They hold grudges like sacred relics. South America territory, the Crimson Jaguar houses, ritual hunters who believe the strongest vampire should rule, and the weak should be fed to the jungle. North America territory, the Iron Concord, corporate vampires who buy cities, own law enforcement, and wage war with contracts. And Antarctica, he said finally, the White Abyss Court, the continent of silence, where sunlight is weak and secrets freeze solid. The room was quiet. Seraphine's expression remained composed, but inside she felt something shift. Because Alaric didn't speak like someone who had studied rumors. He spoke like someone who had been briefed. Trained, prepared, that was not normal. And then he said, but there's an 8th. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. An 8th territory. Alaric nodded. Not on the map. Cairn's voice was sharp. There is no 8th. Sable answered softly. There is. Her eyes gleamed. It moves. Seraphine's throat tightened. Explain. Sable spoke like someone reciting scripture. The Ashen Church has no continent because they don't claim land. She smiled faintly. They claim blood. The knife behind the treaty. Seraphine turned her attention back to Alaric. You said they killed your maker. Why didn't Antarctica retaliate? Alaric's gaze darkened. Because the Ashen Church doesn't fight like clans, he said. They infiltrate, they hollow out courts, they turn princes into spies, they poison bloodlines. He paused, and then they vanish. Seraphine's fingers curled, nails digging into her palm. You're saying there are traitors under the veil? Sable nodded. Yes. Cairn's jaw tightened. Then the tournament itself, Sable finished his thought, is their hunting ground. That sentence struck like a bell. Seraphine felt it immediately, like a ripple beneath stone, a presence, as if something outside the chamber had shifted its weight. Cairn must have felt it too. He glanced toward the doors. Seraphine didn't turn. She simply said, my sentinels are outside. Sable's voice was almost pitying. Your sentinels can stop a blade. She leaned forward. They cannot stop devotion. And then the chamber's warning words screamed, not with sound, with sensation. Every vampire in the room felt it, a sudden spiritual pressure like the air had become sacred and hostile at the same time. The obsidian walls flickered. The floating candles guttered. The black glass doors behind Seraphine shattered inward, not from a blast, from impact. Something hit them like a battering ram, and through the breach, they came. 5 figures in armor that drank light. No insignias, no clan crests, no scent of territory. They moved like blurs, fast enough to make the mind stutter. Seraphine's sentinels outside didn't even have time to scream. They were simply gone. Bodies fell in the hallway like discarded dolls. Cairn's eyes widened. Veil breakers, he hissed. Alaric moved first. Not Cairn. Not the guards. Alaric. He crossed the chamber in a heartbeat and grabbed Seraphine by the waist, pulling her down behind the petrified wood table. The attackers fired something, bolts of pale light that burned the air itself. The bolts struck where Seraphine had been standing a moment before. The table sizzled. Sacred energy, not technology, not pure magic either. Something hybrid, something designed. Seraphine's heart, dead though it was, felt like it clenched, because she recognized the sensation. It felt like the old church cathedrals, like prayers spoken with hatred. Cairn drew a thin blade and shouted orders, and the Noctaran guards surged forward. But the attackers didn't fight like normal vampires. They didn't lunge for throats. They moved with method. One drove a spear into a guard's chest, and the guard didn't heal. He screamed, and ash poured from his mouth. He collapsed, body turning gray. Dying. Real dying. Seraphine's eyes widened. That weapon. Sable's voice was sharp, urgent. Do not let it touch you. Alaric was already moving. He rose into the open, not to show bravery, to intercept. One attacker charged him with a bone-colored blade etched with scripture. The blade came down. Alaric caught it between his palms. The impact should have cleaved through his hands, but it didn't. Instead, the blade shuddered and broke. The attacker froze for half a heartbeat. In that half heartbeat, Alaric struck. Not flamboyant, brutal, efficient. He hit pressure points that made the attacker's muscles seize. Then he grabbed the attacker's head and slammed it into the stone hard enough to crack the floor. The attacker didn't die, but he stopped moving. Seraphine stared. That strength, that reflex, it was beyond normal vampire physiology. Even elders would have struggled to catch a veil-breaker weapon bare-handed. Alaric moved like he'd done this before, like he had trained for it. Another attacker rushed the table, blade aimed at Seraphine. Seraphine's instincts flared. She rose, eyes blazing, preparing to unleash the psychic force that Europe territory's royal bloodline was feared for. But the attacker wore a helm covered in sigils. Psychic shielding. Forbidden. Seraphine felt her mental strike hit a wall and rebound like a scream trapped inside her skull. Pain lanced through her. Her balance faltered. The attacker's blade swung. Alaric intercepted again. He spun, grabbed the attacker's wrist, twisted, and threw the body across the room like it weighed nothing. Cairn shouted. Two sentinels tackled another attacker, but the attacker released a burst of pale light that made them recoil and smoke, their armor turning dull and brittle. The Ashen Church didn't just kill. They purified. They turned vampire flesh into ash. Seraphine's vision sharpened with cold fury. You dare violate the veil in my citadel. The attacker nearest her tilted its head slowly, as if amused. A voice came through its helm, distorted but calm. The veil is your lie. Seraphine's lips curled, showing a flash of ivory fang. And you're standing in Europe territory. The attacker replied with a softness that chilled the room. So are you. And then the attacker moved like a shadow snapping. Seraphine's mind flared again, and for a brief instant, her telepathic defenses slipped. Not by weakness, by proximity, by stress, by the violent closeness of Alaric shielding her. Her consciousness brushed against Alaric's again, and this time she fell deeper. Not into fortress layers, past them, into something buried, something ancient. A memory not his, a voice not his, a presence like a familiar hand on a sword hilt. And she saw Lucian, not a vision, not grief, a true imprint, a blood echo, a soul fragment woven into Alaric's being like a thread in fabric. Seraphine gasped, her composure cracked. The ashen attacker's blade nicked her shoulder, not deep but enough to sting. A single drop of her blood hit the table. And the room reacted. The black glass walls pulsed, the wards screamed louder, the veil itself noticed. Alaric snarled, an animal sound, raw and unroyal. He struck the attacker with a force that sent it into the obsidian wall hard enough to spiderweb cracks. The helm shattered. For an instant, Seraphine saw the face underneath. Not human, not vampire. Something, stitched, like a body rebuilt. Eyes too bright, skin too pale, mouth moving like it was reciting prayer even while it bled. It smiled at Seraphine, blood black and smoking. You're late, it whispered. Then it bit down on something in its mouth. A capsule. The body convulsed. Ash poured out. In seconds, it collapsed into dust. Self-immolation. No interrogation. No answers. The remaining attackers fell back, moving together, disciplined. They didn't retreat like cowards. They withdrew like soldiers. One threw a small object onto the floor. It shattered. White smoke erupted. When it cleared, they were gone. No footsteps, no scent trail. Just ash and silence and dead sentinels in the hallway. The chamber of black glass stood wrecked. The veil had been violated, and every continent would hear about it within hours. Seraphine stood slowly, blood on her shoulder, eyes burning. Cairn approached, grim. My princess, this changes everything. Seraphine didn't answer him. She stared at Alaric. He stood amid the wreckage, breathing hard, eyes fixed on her with something like fury and fear mixed together. "You felt it?" Seraphine said quietly. Alaric's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do," she said, stepping closer, ignoring Cairn's alarmed whisper. Seraphine lifted her hand. Not to strike, to touch. She placed her fingertips gently against Alaric's chest, and beneath the armor, she felt it. A resonance. A familiar pulse that was not blood, not heartbeat, something else, something spiritual, something that made grief and destiny tangle. "Lucien Varel is in you," she whispered. Alaric's expression cracked, just slightly. "Don't say that name," he hissed. Seraphine's voice hardened like frost. "Then tell me the truth." Alaric's eyes flicked toward Eidolon and Sable, toward the Antarctica nobles who suddenly looked far less in control. "I can't," he said. Seraphine's smile was sharp. "Yes, you can." She leaned in. "And you will. Because the veil has been broken, because the Ashen Church has declared war, and because if Lucian's blood echo lives inside you, then you are not just a champion. You are a weapon, a relic, a key." Seraphine stepped back and spoke the next words like a decree. "Captain Alaric Chen, by Europe Territory's authority under the Crimson Veil." She paused, letting every reflection in the black glass witness it. "You belong to my court until this threat is ended." Cairn inhaled sharply. Eidolon's eyes narrowed. Sable's lips curled in quiet satisfaction. Alaric stared at Seraphine, and for the first time since they met, his composure faltered. "Princess," he said low, "you don't understand what you're claiming." Seraphine's eyes gleamed. "I understand enough." She turned toward the shattered doors and the bodies beyond. "Prepare the citadel," she ordered Cairn. "Summon the continental delegates. Lock down the arena. No one leaves Europe territory tonight." Cairn bowed, already moving. Seraphine looked back at Alaric. "And you," she said softly, "dangerously, are coming with me." Alaric didn't move. He didn't bow. He didn't smile. But his eyes, those calculating, war-trained eyes, held something new. A flicker of dread, not for himself, for her, because he knew what was coming next. And deep inside him, something old and familiar stirred. A voice like Lucian's whispering from the bottom of his soul, "Don't you dare waste this life." The arena of 7 knights no longer roared. It whispered. Delegates from the 7 territories had been summoned under emergency decree, and when vampire royalty moved in urgency, the earth itself seemed to listen. The Grand Council chamber beneath Vespera Citadel was circular, by design. No throne stood higher than another during Veil assemblies. That illusion had always amused Seraphine. Power was never equal, but ritual mattered. 7 elevated platforms ringed the chamber, each marked by the sigil of a continent: Europe, Noctara dynasty; Africa, Sunspite Dominion; Asia, Jade Serpent Courts; North America, Iron Concord; South America, Crimson Jaguar houses; Australia, Duskborn Reef; Antarctica, White Abyss Court. And tonight, all 7 were occupied. The air felt thick with ancient grudges. Seraphine took her place at the Europe dice. Cairn stood behind her. Across from her, the African representative, High Warlord Nkosi Sunspite, sat like a coiled storm, scarred, gold-eyed, and unashamedly armored. To her left, the Jade Serpent emissary, Lady Shu Ling, folded her hands gracefully, smile serene and utterly unreadable. North America's representative, Director Hale of the Iron Concord, wore a tailored black suit, corporate insignia gleaming faintly at his collar. South America's matriarch, Izel Jaguar, leaned forward in ceremonial crimson robes, eyes bright with ritualistic curiosity. Australia's duskborn envoy, Captain Marrow Tide, lounged lazily, barefoot, tattoos winding up his arms like coral patterns. And Antarctica. Eidolon and Sable stood behind their champion, behind Alaric, because tonight he was the center of gravity whether anyone liked it or not. Seraphine let silence stretch, then she spoke. "The Ashen Church has violated the veil within Europe territory." The chamber reacted instantly, not panic, calculation. Nkosi's voice was gravel and thunder. "Proof." Seraphine flicked her fingers. An orb of memory projection ignited in the center of the chamber, showing the chamber of black glass attack in precise detail. The ash weapons, the broken sigils, the attackers disintegrating. When the projection ended, the silence felt heavier. Director Hale adjusted his cuff. "We've seen similar disappearances in North America," he said smoothly. "Corporate assets neutralized, executives turning to dust mid-meeting. Murmurs. Lady Shuling inclined her head. Asia territory lost 3 elders last year. We believed it internal sabotage. Matriarch Easel's eyes gleamed. South America has rumors of purifiers operating in the rainforest border. Marrowtide snorted softly. Australia had cultists burning themselves on beaches last solstice. Every territory. Seraphine's jaw tightened. You knew, she said quietly. The chamber did not deny it. They had all suspected something, but no one wanted to speak first. Because admitting the Ashen Church existed meant admitting the veil was weak. Nkosi leaned forward. Why bring this to full council now? Seraphine's gaze shifted to Alaric. Because the Ashen Church targeted him. All eyes followed. Alaric stood in the center of the chamber floor, not on a dais, not elevated, not seated. He looked more like a defendant than a hero. Eidolon spoke carefully. Captain Chen survived their initial purge in Antarctica. Shuling's smile deepened. Purges imply secrets. Alaric didn't look at her. They were hunting something specific, he said. Me. Hale's expression sharpened. And why would a rogue faction risk open war for a single captain? Seraphine rose slowly. Because he is not just a captain. She stepped down from her dais. The entire chamber shifted. European royalty did not descend lightly. She stopped beside Alaric, then turned to face the council. He carries a blood echo. Whispers rippled instantly. Nkosi's eyes widened fractionally. Impossible. Seraphine's voice hardened. Lucien Virel's imprint lives inside him. The chamber exploded with overlapping reactions. Jaguar laughter, serpent hisses, iron concord whispers. Marrowtide leaned forward. You're telling us he's a resurrection? Alaric's jaw clenched. I didn't ask for it. Eidolon finally stepped forward. It is called the Echo Forge. That name silenced even the loudest skeptics, because every territory had heard the rumor, the forbidden project, the idea that had once nearly split the veil. The Echo Forge had been whispered centuries ago by warlords who wanted immortality without lineage. The concept was simple. If vampire blood carried memory, if ancient bloodlines held instinct, then perhaps the greatest warriors could be imprinted, preserved, copied, and grafted into new vessels. It had been outlawed instantly. Too dangerous, too blasphemous, too close to playing God. Seraphine turned to Eidolon. Antarctica revived it. Eidolon did not deny it. We did not revive it, he said calmly. We perfected it. The chamber trembled, not physically, politically. Sable stepped forward now. The Ashen Church believes the veil is corruption, that vampire clans have grown soft in politics. Her gaze moved from dice to dice. They believe extinction is purification, Nkosi growled. They believe they can purge us? Sable nodded. They want the original bloodlines erased. Shuling's eyes gleamed. Which would make him, she nodded toward Alaric, their greatest threat. Alaric's voice was quiet. They killed my maker because he oversaw the forge. Seraphine's stomach turned. Your maker built this? Alaric nodded once. He didn't just resurrect warriors, he stabilized echoes. Seraphine felt something ancient shift. Lucien volunteered, she whispered. Eidolon inclined his head. He did. The chamber went dead silent. Seraphine's composure cracked for the first time in front of other territories. He died protecting me. Sable's voice softened slightly. And then he died again, offering himself to the forge. Seraphine staggered back a half step. Cairn moved instantly to steady her. He chose this? She demanded. Alaric's eyes met hers. He wanted to return when Europe needed him. The words hit harder than any blade. Seraphine's mind flashed with memory. Lucien bleeding in her arms. Lucien whispering, don't waste this life. Had he known? Had he planned this? Had he trusted Antarctica with his soul? The chamber shifted again. Director Hale broke the silence. If this Echo Forge exists, how many? Eidolon answered. 1. All eyes returned to Alaric. 1 stabilized echo. Nkosi stood. You gamble with ancestral spirits. Eidolon's voice didn't waver. We prepare for extinction. Marrowtide laughed low. Seems like someone was right. He nodded toward Alaric. War's coming. Seraphine closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were steel. The Ashen Church has declared open war. She stepped back onto her dais. Europe proposes unified defense under Veil Emergency Authority. Hale raised a brow. And who commands? Seraphine's gaze never left Alaric. He does. The chamber erupted again. Shuling smiled dangerously. You would hand continental defense to a hybrid experiment? Seraphine's voice cut like ice. I would hand it to the only vampire who survived the church's purge. Nukosi studied Alaric carefully. You carry warrior blood, Alaric answered plainly. I carry strategy. Hale leaned forward. You understand continental warfare? Alaric's eyes sharpened. I understand insurgency. He looked around the chamber slowly. The Ashen Church isn't attacking territories. They're hollowing them. The room grew quiet. They don't want land, Alaric continued. They want collapse. He pointed toward the projection orb. They attacked inside a veil-protected chamber. His voice hardened. That means someone inside these territories is feeding them access. No one spoke. Because he was right, Seraphine felt it too. The veil had not simply been broken, it had been bypassed. Someone had allowed it. And then, a scream echoed from above. Daylight hours. Every vampire in the chamber felt it, a vibration, a death, a true death. Cairn's head snapped upward. That's from the upper courtyards. A runner burst into the chamber, pale and shaking. My princess? He collapsed to his knees. Lady Shuling's second emissary. Shuling rose instantly. What of her? The runner swallowed. She burned. The chamber froze. Burned. Not by ritual, not by blade, by sunlight. Impossible. The council chamber was sealed from day. Seraphine's voice dropped into deadly calm. How? The runner trembled. She was walking through the courtyard, and light, real light, hit her. Hale's face went still. The ring vault, he whispered. Seraphine's blood turned cold. Europe territory housed one of the ancient artifacts, a ring forged by witches, a daylight-binding relic. Only 7 existed. If one had been stolen, the Ashen Church now had a vampire who could walk in the sun. Seraphine's eyes met Alaric's. War had just shifted phases. He understood instantly. They're testing us, he said. Seraphine nodded once. Lock down the citadel. She turned to the 7 thrones. The veil stands on a knife's edge. Her voice echoed through the chamber like a vow. And if we fall into daylight, her eyes burned. We burn together. The council did not argue now, because fear had replaced pride, and somewhere above them, sunlight had just become a weapon.